story is a metaphor for life. It's teaching us what life is, to prepare us, to equip us. And that the deepest pleasure of the theater is learning without being taught. What makes a great screenwriter is somebody with something to say. But you have to make sense out of life. And this is why most people can't do it, because they can't make sense out of life, let alone make sense out of life and then express it in writing. Telling story beautifully is meaningful because it makes life a little less painful. It makes life just a little more livable. And so people who want to write, I'm their champion, and I would do my best to help them understand what they're up to, because I know that without them, life would be unlivable. I noticed your mug here. It says journey. Journey is a euphemism for the struggle of life. Life is an uphill battle. It's Sisyphus pushing that rock, okay? It's not a journey.
This week on the show, we have Robert McKee, who is a legend in Hollywood. He's been teaching people how to write screenplays for the past 30 years. 50,000 students, over 60 of them have won Academy Awards. Over 140 of them have won Emmy Awards. He really is the godfather of this business, with people like Peter Jackson of The Hobbit, Kirk Douglas, and the entire Pixar team saying that he is the man. And we had him in studio. I'm actually attending his course this weekend as well, because story is so important in our lives, because it helps us explain this reality called life and the suffering that we go through as humans. And if you can understand how to create story, you can understand life better, business better, everything. And look, Robert is the OG. He's 76 years old, and he's still touring like a madman. London, LA, Berlin, New York City. He is teaching students on a regular basis, and he was actually featured in the movie Adaptation with Nicolas Cage as a guy who was swearing on stage and really beating the heck out of people that want to be writers. I really enjoyed my time with Robert, and I know you're going to enjoy this very special interview. He does not sit down with many people for very long, and he really drops science about Trump, about what it takes to be a writer, about what story is all about, and he even wants to change the tagline of London Real from "It's about the journey" to "It's about the struggle." And I appreciate that from Robert. And if you want to get involved in some more struggle, join us for the Life Accelerator program, which is finishing on Friday. Jump in for 6 weeks of training where I'm going to teach you about mindfulness, mindset, your diet, your movement patterns, relationships, and how to be successful for the rest of the year. It's an amazing course, so jump in now inside the Academy. And now I leave you with an amazing story by Robert McKee. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Robert McKee, who has lectured on storytelling for 3 decades and whose book Story is the Bible for screenwriters, TV writers, and entertainment executives like myself. Your former students include 63 Academy Award winners, 164 Emmy Award winners, and 30 Writers Guild of America Award winners, with names like Peter Jackson of the Hobbit trilogy, the actor Kirk Douglas, the author Stephen Pressfield, and the entire team at Pixar singing your praises. You were famously played by Brian Cox in the film Adaptation with Nicolas Cage and have also appeared on The Simpsons. Your book, Dialogue, The Art of Verbal Action for Page, Stage, and Screen, was released last year to critical acclaim, and your book, Character, is coming soon, I hope. I will be attending your 3-day story seminar this weekend in London. I've got my Casablanca screenplay printed out. Robert, welcome to London Real.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you very much.
You are no stranger to this city, and I was wondering if you could tell us about the time you spent here and what London means to story, theater, everything.
Oh, my love affair with London goes back in the mid-'60s. I was artist in residence at the National Theatre when it was at the Old Vic, and Olivier was artistic director. I remember I flew what we used to call Icelandic Airlines and Storm Door Company. We flew from New York to Maine to Helsinki, to Iceland, and then on to London. And
just to get here.
Yeah, just to get here. And I got in a cab, and I was driving into the city, and I was bouncing up and down in the back seat of the cab, screaming at the driver things like, "Is that the Thames? Is that the Thames? Is the actual Thames? You know, is that Big Ben? Is that big, you know?" And I was just, couldn't have been more electrified by it. And then some years later, I moved here, and I lived in London, and then I bought a place in Boscastle, Cornwall. And I had, for a decade, I had the ideal life of city country, going back and forth, 2 weeks in one place, 2 weeks in the next. And it was a beautiful life. And the reason, I would want to live in London, if I would do it again if it were possible, is the theater. I grew up in the theater. I spent my first half of my professional life on stage and directing theater. And the theater in London is just the best in the world. New York is fine. I'm sure Paris is fine, but it's just, there's virtually no comparison. When I go to plays in New York, this is really pet peeve-ish, but it's a fact. I understand 60-70% of what is said from the stage, because American actors don't answer. It's about, about TV signs. And when I come to London, people pronounce their final consonants. And English is a consonant language, and so you can understand what is being said, because they're trained, and the acting overall is always great. So. I love this town. It's the most. I think London is beautiful, physically beautiful. I know this, sounds blasphemous, but I think London is far more beautiful than Paris. Paris is repetitious. Every street looks like every other street after a while. And London is, especially when it's uplit at night, it's just breathtaking. And the change from neighborhood to neighborhood is rich, and history of all kinds, and modern, and English architects are superb. And the new buildings are beautiful. So I have a laundry list of reasons why, if I could, I would live here.
Maybe we'll speak to your wife and get you over here half a year. Do you think the history of theater here produces different kinds of actors then, when it comes to
it used to, but it's not true anymore. when I was working in the theater here in the 60s, there was clearly RADA, Lambda trained actors had the voice, you know, and it was difficult for them, in many cases, to work on screen because they just couldn't get small enough.
Couldn't tone it down.
You know, because both actors start with the same. They bring a character to life within, but the stage actor gathers up that creation and projects it into the audience. The film actor creates within and then invites the camera toward them to look inside. And as a film actor, you don't want to do anything that would push the camera away from you. Whereas in the theater, it's the opposite. And a lot of Brits, when I was here in the 60s, just didn't know how to throw the switch. But not anymore. I mean, the quality of acting in the world, certainly in the English-speaking world, is breathtaking, I think. I mean, when you go to a play or a new TV series comes on, and they're wonderful, and you go, who are these people? You know? And they come from the same line 100 deep at every audition. And they are so beautifully prepared to act roles that will never be written for them. I mean, the art of writing is decades behind the art of acting. These wonderful actors, thanks to the development of long-form television, when I saw Game of Thrones and the Vikings, right? I looked at those casts and I thought, all those guys who thought they were retired, yeah. Right? All those old men, veterans of the stage, are now, playing all these wonderful characters in these series. And so I do my best to try to keep the quality of writing progressively building over the time, and thanks to long form television now, the number of really fine characters available to actors is multiplying. And so, because the writing in long form television is just excellent. I mean, there's a lot of crap too, but the best of the best is just breathtakingly wonderful stuff. I mean, from The Wire to Breaking Bad to Game of Thrones, indeed, and all that. I'm very optimistic because I think regarding the future of writing, because I think long form television is going. They're already doing it. These writers are building the cathedrals of the 21st century. 100 hours of, when I do television day, which I do on Thursday, a couple of days from now, we look at Breaking Bad as 26 storylines. Between the 26 storylines, there are 205 acts. I mean, a 205 act work, right? I mean, it's the magnitude is just astounding, and that was Breaking Bad. I think it's 86 hours. So, I mean, a novel, even a 900,000 page novel, might be one season. And now you have 7, 8, 10 seasons of often really superb quality writing. And this, I think, is going to, I'm hoping, will invite really ambitious writers with visions of able to encompass massive works like that, will inspire them to want to write. Because I know, writing a novel is a lot of work and iffy. Writing for the stage, again, iffy. Writing for a screen, you make more money if you sell, but how many, most screenwriters who are really good and really busy are getting something to the screen like once every 5 years. That's, it's hard.
Hard to survive on.
Hard to survive, and hard to keep your love of it, your enthusiasm going. The Writers Guild did a study once that for every 20 screenplays for which serious money is paid to option the screen rights, only one ever gets made. So there's a lot of writers, I was one of them in Hollywood for years, living on option money, selling what you write regularly, but then watching it perish for various reasons.
Which must crush you as a writer to see it not be made.
Yeah, it does, but then there's one screenplay I sold 5 times. This is a wonderful business. You get to sell things and keep them, right? People just love this script and it never gets made. Last time it was sold a couple of years ago, optioned, I called my lawyer and I said, they got another deal. He said, another one? I said, yeah. I said, people read it, they come all over it, but nobody ever gets pregnant.
Well said. So is this an unheard of time in human history when it comes to this long-form story?
I think so.
We've never written or even orally told stories
Nobody's
this
ever
long.
attempted that kind of magnitude before.
Does the Bible compare to, say, a Breaking Bad series?
No, the Bible is a bunch of little short stories.
Right.
And there's no through line. It keeps changing authors every 20 pages. So, no, it's of a magnitude nobody's ever imagined before, and consequently, there's what's essential in long-form television is complexity of character. What keeps an audience watching a TV series is one of two things: either characters are being revealed as human beings of a kind we never saw in the last 3 years. Suddenly a character does something and you realize, my God, that is true to character, but we've never seen that quality, that trait in that character before. They're being revealed and or changed. Characters arcing better or descending into some degenerative state or whatever, but they're changing for better or for worse. And as long as the characters are being revealed and or changed, because not all characters change, but those who do, we're fascinated. It really isn't the storytelling that pulls people through 100 hours of a long form television. I mean, the storytelling's wonderful, but The Sopranos, for example, ends with him and his family sitting in a restaurant. Yeah. Because he's been totally revealed. Tony's never going to change. The Tonys of this world never change. And everything knowable about him is known. They're end of series.
Right. You called that exhaustion.
It's the character exhaustion.
And you said that kind of revealed to you a new way of ending something.
Yeah, I until The Sopranos, I never realized that when it gets to this kind of length, this kind of complexity, complication, that what we're really watching for is character. I think this is true of many novels, too.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of novels, the last chapter is not a real true climax, it's a sort of fade out. And the characters are exhausted. And so when I saw Sopranos, I realized that's another way to end a story. Just they're emptied out. Thank you very much. It's been wonderful knowing you.
Goodbye. And when I think about Breaking Bad, I mean, Walter White, you're constantly seeing these new aspects of his character, and he's changing, and Jesse's changing, and his relationship with his wife, and you're saying that's what pulls us along, not the next drug deal, not the next this or that as much.
No. I mean, there are arcs, and in fact, it gets so complicated in long-form TV that, as I said, there's 205 acts. So after a while, an act is important, but not that important. So I had to devise a new term that I call movements, which is an act is a major turning point. A story climax is an absolute turning point. So between the act and the story climax, I created a movement, which is a massive turning point, which usually means some kind of compound. not only did the character survive life and death, but he's now the kingpin of whatever, and is found love. And I mean, a movement climax is more powerful than an act, usually because it compounds change. So it's not just one kind of change, it's two or three different kinds of change, all happening in the same event, and so it becomes a movement. So I broke Breaking Bad into 4 movements in order to make sense out of this, because, you know, like I said, 26 storylines and 205 acts, and you get lost in the forest, I mean, literally.
And this is something you saw coming, I think, 10 or 15 years ago when you looked at the state of screenwriting and you said, evil is the thing that hasn't really been explored about people. And I know a lot of your students went on to write some of these things like Sopranos and The Wire and some of these other things. Am I summarizing that?
Yeah, well, that's true. It's true. I mean, you can't have complexity of character necessary to sustain 80, 90, 100 hours of storytelling without moral contradiction. I mean, if people are just, you know, good people versus bad people, that's not going to last very long.
Right.
I mean, that's a feature film.
That's Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly. And so you need characters with tremendous inner conflicts, and there's various kinds of inner conflicts, but the most compelling are moral conflicts, of course. And I don't know, it's a chicken and egg thing, whether characters with deep moral conflicts led to the development of long form, or long form developed characters with compound moral conflicts because they needed complex characters. So I remember going back to The Wire. I mean, The Wire is, you know, 2 worlds, the police and the criminals, and you don't know who the good guys are, and definitely the bad guys turn good every when you least expect it. So the complexity of those characters and their moral contradictions were multiple. And so they became, you know, and the cast of that, The Wire was fantastic. And then came 6 Feet Under, Mad Men, and so forth. And characters like Don Draper in Mad Men is a profoundly complicated, self-contradictory, moral mess who's trying to figure out, you know, he's going through what we used to call an existential crisis, trying to figure out what the point of it all is and who he is. And he's capable of telling any lie and betraying anybody, and on it goes. And so,
and we're fascinated with that because deep down inside we know that's something maybe like us. Is that why we tune in?
Oh, we wouldn't tune in from day one if we didn't recognize that. I mean, that's empathy, and that's absolute in principal characters. And it happens without thought. I mean, it's not like an audience sits there thinking, that character is somehow human, like me, and so I want him to have whatever he wants, because, you know, if I were that character in those circumstances, I'd want the same thing. I mean, it's not like that. They just sense a thing, that this is a human being. And it's amazing how, you know, somebody else walks in the room, and you go, not me. I mean, you're not going to empathize with that character. And I can lecture about it, and I can define it, and I can give examples. But from character to character, from story to story, why readers or audiences find a particular character empathetic and someone else not is there's some kind of one-off going on between the character and the particular person who's reading it or watching it. When 2 sensitive, intelligent people watch the same film and have 2 entirely opposite reactions, it's got nothing to do with the film or the novel or whatever. It has everything to do with empathy. The one who liked it empathized. The one who didn't. Why one did and one didn't, who can say? But it's empathy. So that has to hook them, you know, from the pilot episode or from the first 10, 15 minutes of a film, the first chapter of a novel. You have to feel there's a shared humanity.
You must have empathy to have a successful anything, any type of story.
Well, yeah, there are exceptions. I don't think there's any empathy in Agatha Christie. I mean, we sympathize with the Miss Marples and the Sherlock Holmeses and master detectives, are sympathetic characters, but you don't actually empathize with the master detective because they're superhuman. They never screw up. They always get, whoever. And so they're beyond empathy, but they're charming. They're sympathetic. You like them, but you don't empathize with them. So there's always an exception. But generally, yeah, without empathy, there are films or books that you might read to the end just to get the answer to the question, how does this turn out? Certainly, certain thrillers or crime stories, you may or may not empathize, but your curiosity gets you to turn the pages. And so there's always exceptions. But generally, no, without empathy, there's no involvement. And in something serial, like a television series, they're not going to be back next week. And from season to season, they're certainly not going to be back next year without empathy. I mean, I can't wait for Game of Thrones to, get back, and so I can, because we don't watch them one a week. We collect them. We do it most. I'm sure. We wait until the season, and then we binge, right? There must be 15, 20 characters in Game of Thrones I empathize with. I mean, there's practically no one there I don't empathize with. Same thing in Michael Hirst's marvelous series, The Vikings. Again, there's a multitude of empathetic characters on both sides of the battles, and people get, because of empathy is so powerful, and it builds in long form. In a film, you empathize for 2 hours and it's over, right? But in long form, season after season, these people become your friends. You worry about them. You think about them more than you do your friends. I mean, it's strange out there. So yeah, that's primal.
I was wondering if you could talk to the basics of story, because a lot of people watch this and say, I'm not a screenwriter, I'm not an author, story's not important to me. And yet, story, I believe, affects everything about the human experience. And I was wondering if you could explain that concept, because when I read your book Story...
Yeah, well, there's this ancient and false dichotomy between story and character. When Aristotle wrote Poetics, he said story number one is the most creative, most difficult aspect of the work, character number two. But then by the end of the 19th century, people had it inverted. No, character is number one, story is number two. The truth is, there's no difference. Character is story. Story is character. Because the way in which you come to understand a character and feel empathy and involvement is by watching them make choices under pressure to take one action versus the many different actions they could have taken, but they choose a particular action as a tactic, an effort to get what they want at that moment and overall what they want out of life. When they take an action and they get a reaction from their world, we call that an event. And so characters take actions and the world reacts to them. That's story. Story is the actions that the characters choose to take and the consequences of those actions. And so story is character. Character is story. And so when somebody says story is not important to me, character is, well, what they're not aware of is, in fact, they're gripped by the story because they're fascinated by the character who makes those kind of choices in those circumstances and takes those actions and suffers the consequences or benefits, whatever. And as they watch this character and life interact, that's story. But, often the difference is that often these actions and reactions are within a character, They act and react within themselves. Why did I do that? Or oh, great, or whatever. And it's not a car crash. The car crash happened inside of the character, so to speak, right? When it's internalized like that, people tend to think that's not story. That's character, because it's going on inside of the character. But of course, it's story taking place inside of a character. And all great writers, Virginia Woolf and James Joyce and the great stream of conscious writers understood that the stream of consciousness is a dynamic of choices and actions, all happening within the mind of a character.
Okay. And why is that story important to us? I mean, you've probably quoted John Lawson saying story is created when the subjective and the objective realm collide, and that this is actually like equipment for living. But a lot of humans, I don't think, realize.
It's not important that they do.
Okay.
It's not important.
But I found it fascinating when you broke it down in the first couple chapters.
It's only important to writers.
Really?
It's that this is technique, and this is theory, and this is, understanding the art form, which is important to writers. But you don't need audiences or readers turning pages or sitting in the theater analyzing the action, reaction, and the subtextual behaviors of characters versus their textual. It's set,
That'll hurt the story.
That'll destroy their experience.
Okay, but story itself makes us who we are as humans, creates nations, creates movements. That whole idea of a fictional universe makes us do the things that help us cooperate with each other, things like that, right?
Well, yes, because storytelling, story is a metaphor for life. That's what it was Kenneth Burke you quoted, who said stories are equipment for living. And so story on one level is teaching us what life is, to prepare us, to equip us, so that when the sort of thing that happens to that character happens to me, I have some sense of what that is about. In fact, this is as old as time. I mean, Aristotle in the Poetics talked about the rational experience of a play and the emotional experience of a play, and he separated them. And the emotional experience he called catharsis, and that's what everybody's written about. But he also said there's a rational experience, and that the deepest pleasure of the theater is learning without being taught. And you go to a great play, Shakespeare, Eugene O'Neill, you go to a great play, a great film, read a great novel, and you are learning what life is for these characters in these circumstances without being taught. And you're absorbing life through these stories so that you can be hopefully a little wiser, a little more temperate, a little more civilized, and a little more prepared for the catastrophes which will come. And so without storytelling, I mean, we would be utterly uncivilized. So the subject matter is life. Right now in my country, here too in England, but in my country, the tensions, the suspicions between people. I mean, every time I pull into a garage, I think, oh, there's a guy who voted for Trump. I mean, and he sees me coming in my Jag, and he goes, there's a guy who voted for Hillary, right? And we're already enemies, and he hasn't even filled my tank up yet, right? And so the stress is really compounding. And I gave a little talk some time ago, and I said, that's one way to look at it, the knot it puts in your belly every morning when you read the New York Times. The other way to look at it is subject matter. Because I was talking to a room full of writers. So I said, just get yourselves together. You don't have to write politically, but this is going to affect families, it's going to affect love relationships, it's going to affect children, it's going to affect boss-employee relate. Everything is going to be affected by that we now have a madman in the presidency. And therefore, experience in America is going to be unlike it's ever been. It's subject matter for comedy, for drama, for whatever. I said, so, just get out there and take advantage of it. Right.
And it's important work now more than ever.
Exactly. Somebody's got to tell the truth.
Is Trump a good storyteller?
No, he's not a good storyteller.
He must have been if he's president.
I don't know where people get these ideas. He's a bullshitter. That's not storytelling. It's bullshitting. Okay? He's a bullshitter. He's from the
Someone's buying it.
He's from the business world, real estate business. Look, any TV commercial is a compound of two things: bragging and promising. We're the biggest, we're the best, we're the newest, the shiniest, and we're going to do this for you, we're going to do this for you. You're going to get sick of how happy you're going to be, right? I mean, it's bragging and promising. That's a TV commercial. He is a walking television commercial. He brags and he promises. Brags and he promises. That's not storytelling. That's bullshitting. The story has its feet in the clay of truth. I mean, it's sliding through the swamps of what is.
Okay, but someone's buying it.
But somebody's buying the bullshit.
And the story narrative of his life, I understand what you mean by commercials, but the narrative of his life story, which he wrote and rewrote, there is something there that people see, I think.
Yes, but it's bullshit.
Probably,
okay?
yes.
He was this rich. He was born rich. His father was a multimillionaire real estate guy, and the only thing important that apparently ever happened to Trump was his older brother became an alcoholic and killed himself with booze, right? And that was a lesson. And so he's a teetotaler. And I just wish he'd get drunk once in a while. Just maybe it would stir some insight in him, because there is in vino veritas, but he doesn't know truth. So.
Let me ask
but
you.
anyway, it's terrible. It's like the tale of two cities: the best of times and the worst of times, right? And it is
terrible, but
good,
good,
the worst of times,
and maybe good for business when it comes to writing, as in we need it.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, indeed.
Your book is called Story, but it's for screenwriters. Is that correct? And can you talk about why you wrote it, some of the things I'll be learning this weekend, and really the basis of why it's so popular?
I had a fight with my publisher over the title. My publisher was Judith Regan, who's a queen of the bestsellers, and she wanted to call it screenwriting. And I said, no, put screenwriting in the subtitle. I'm going to call it story. Because even though the majority of examples are taken from film, there's an occasional play or novel, or TV show that gets mentioned, but it is primarily for screenwriters, technically. But the substance of it is true for everybody. Documentary, I mean, you mentioned all the awards that my students have won, but they've also won Bookers and Pulitzers. So the reason it uses examples primarily from screenwriting is because that's what everybody knows. And if I try to write a book called Story, for subtitle, the substance, structure, and style, the art of playwriting. And all of my examples were Tennessee Williams and John Osborne or somebody.
No one's seen them.
Exactly. So, but now I've done the book on Dialogue is out, and that is for page, stage, and screen. And from now on, everything I write is going to be multi-confessional that way. I'll take examples from all the media of storytelling. Character will certainly be all the media. And because I think I've always felt this when I was teaching at universities, that there was something really artificial about a theater department, an English literature department, a film department, that all these people should be talking together. They should be working together and helping inspire each other's work, and that it's all story at the end of the day, and then they separate when they by medium when they go to put it on stage or put in front of a camera, but the heart and soul of it is the same, and how the story gets to the world is filtered and influenced by the medium it's in, and certain stories are stronger on page than they are on screen, whatever. There are differences, but at the heart it's all the same. And so I'm not going to let those academic departments determine what I do anymore. And so every book I'm going to write, I'm going to do one in comedy, I'll do one in love stories, and every book I write in the future will be for all three.
What makes a good screenwriter?
My favorite screenwriter is Ingmar Bergman, and there's been ever since Aristotle there's been a debate about form and content, and the form is critically important because without it you can't express the content. And today, I think generally, the storytelling is good. Certainly these masterpieces of long-form TV are great. There's some flawed films now and then, but even then, the problem is content today. Writers who just don't have anything to say, and they still want to write, and so they copy other people's pieces, and or they look for a trend in genre and whatnot, and just sort of redo thrillers again and again and again, whatever. What makes a great screenwriter is somebody with something to say, which is the same thing for a novel or a play. Because what difference does it make how technically good you are as a screenwriter if your material is banal and your characters are vapid?
You said an author has to write 10 things that fail before at least.
Probably 20 is more realistic.
20 like entire novels, screenplays.
Yeah, well, it's going to take, generally, when you look at the careers of most people who actually got, success enough that we would know their name, it took them 10 years from their early 20s to their early 30s maybe, or more, until they finally got a novel published or a play. If they were working hard, as they must be during those 10 years, and if it takes 6 months to write a quality play or novel or screenplay, that's 20. If they, and I'm one of those writers who write slowly, if they write slowly, it's 1 a year, that's 10 failed works that nobody wants. But what's hard for people, but they'll get it once they do it. What's hard for people to realize is that the first thing you write will be the worst thing you will ever write, because you don't know what the hell you're doing. And so it's, you're struggling and you're trying to make whatever. And, it hopefully is good enough that you will not put a gun to your head, that you'll do project, novel number 2, play number 2, and keep going. But it's going to take 10 failures to learn to master this craft. Now, there are people who make it sooner than that, congratulations. But 10 years, 10 failed works is normal. It's normal. Because this is not a hobby. It's an art form and a profession. And you have to give your life to it. And so you've got to be willing to put in a decade of failure and hard work so that you have at least one major, if not 2 major works every year. And it gets better and better and better. I mean, I'm always troubled by people who come to my lectures and they have this one script they want to write. I said, well, that's very nice. Your uncle's adventures in World War II, they're very interesting. But if it doesn't get made, what are you going to do next? What's your next project? And their eyes go blank. There is no next project, which means if it doesn't happen, they'll never write again, which means they're a dilettante. They really should leave the room.
You've mentioned the phrase, the art in themselves or themselves in the art.
That's Stanislavski.
Stanislavski said that. What did he mean by that?
There's two kinds of people in the arts. Those who love themselves in the art. They want to be in the theater. They want to be literary. They want to be in the movies. They want to be whatever. They have a desire to be in one of these art forms because it's romantic and it's exciting, and they want to be in the art. And then there are people who are fascinated by the art in themselves, who just have this monster inside of them called talent, and the monster eats pages, and if they're not feeding that beast day in, day out, they're miserable. And they're obsessed with making sense out of life, and foremost, they're fascinated by people. Not genres, people. Whether they end up writing comedy or action or a education plot, as we call it. Some story about somebody struggling to find meaning, whatever it's about. That what got them into it, they discovered the story because what got them into the writing were characters. They had an imagination, they saw something on the street, something triggered, and they just observe people, and they have great self-knowledge. Because the truth is, for every writer, every person, the only person you ever know is yourself. And everybody else, is at a distance.
And that's why you need some maturity and experience to write the great work.
As Chekhov once said, he said, everything I know about human nature, I learned from me. And so you have to have self-awareness, and penetrate the mysteries of your humanity, observe the people around you. And great writers are fascinated by people, and then they find them in situations and they make choices, things happen to them, and they respond to that, and story begins to grow. I mean, I can't know the numbers, but that's the majority. That's 80% of writing, is it starts with a character, a relationship, and develops into a story. There are writers who start with an ending or an inciting incident or a great scene, and then they find characters and build story backwards and forwards from that inspiration, whatever it was, and the inspiration was something that happened rather than who this person is. And at the end of the day, they end up with fascinating characters as well. So the order in which things happen is not important. but I think those writers who sustain a career and get better and better with everything they write are people fascinated with people.
Continue watching this fascinating conversation for free by clicking on the link below to visit our website, and I'll see you on the inside.
The quality of the storytelling in the world is getting better by far, and that will balance the scale of what's happening politically, and that somehow we will keep a balance, and that the writers, the journalists, they're storytellers too, will step in and save us.